Hi, guys. Welcome back to the That's Where I'm At podcast. If you're only listening today, I hope you'll go check out and subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can see our beautiful faces and leave some love for our guest. Today on the show, I have Melissa. Melissa is an award-winning essayist, screenwriter, and advocate for survivors of religious and narcissistic abuse, a conversation she continues daily on Instagram and TikTok. Her memoir, Holy Disobedience, Sex, Sin, and Secrets in the Biggest Church No One Knows, won the 2021 Book Pipeline Unpublished Nonfiction Manuscript Prize and has been excerpt. I don't know how to say that word. It's a big word for me. In the Huntington Post, a contributor to I missed my line here. A contributor to Take the Fruit, an anthology of religious trauma, her writing has appeared in magazines across the country. She holds a BA in English literature from Barnard College at Columbia University and is based in California. Melissa, welcome. It's so exciting to talk to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Wow. I mean, you've done some stuff. You've done you've been talking about some stuff. So I want to know, well, like you've been talking online and then you wrote this book. So tell me why you decided to start talking, and then you got to tell us what's this biggest church that nobody knows about.
All right. I think like so many people got online mostly during COVID.
Yeah.
Like I had a little personal Instagram account, where I just like posted random pictures or whatever. But during COVID, I had been writing my book off and on for almost 20 years, but I really had never known if I wanted to publish it. It was mostly kind of a therapy exercise for myself, just
Yeah.
recording. And I'm a writer, I've always been a writer. I write for magazines and whatever. And so that was the way I processed information. And then during COVID, of course, everybody got online, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start talking about this weird religion that I was raised in that nobody knows about. And it's bigger than the Mormons, it's bigger than the
Wow.
SBC, like significantly bigger than the Mormons, and no one has ever heard of them. It's called the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and
Hmm.
it's a fundamentalist Christian organization, but very cult-like. And so I thought, oh, I'm gonna start making these little videos saying like, oh, we were raised in this weird religion where we couldn't eat spices, we couldn't have mustard, we couldn't swim on Saturdays. I just started
Wow.
saying all this goofy stuff that was
Yeah.
true about our upbringing. And my book involved, and we'll talk about that more in
Yeah.
detail later, but my book involved talking about the huge problem in the Adventist Church with child sexual abuse and regular
Mhm.
sexual abuse that they cover up, they hide, they move perpetrators around, they don't deal with their problem. And so I was writing about this, but I wasn't ready to talk about it online.
Yeah.
And but people started, once they knew I was talking about the Adventist church, my DMs started filling up with people telling me, oh, I was abused in that church. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, this is really this, I'm going to start talking about it. So I started recording survivor stories, and
Oh.
that really got me processing the religion.
Mm.
I could talk about it, oh, ha ha ha, it was this weird thing, but I'd never really processed how it had affected me deeply.
Mhm.
And hearing other people's stories and writing my book,
Yeah.
it all just came kind of internally crashing down. And I kind of deconstructed my whole life starting then, and the religion and how it encouraged abusive, getting into abusive
Mhm.
relationships because the religion was abusive. So it was a multi-step process.
Wow. So were you still in the church when you were talking about it?
Not at all. So
Oh,
that was,
okay.
yeah, that was the interesting part was I had left at 18. Like as
Okay.
soon as I was an adult, I was
Yeah.
out of there. And I just thought naively that leaving equaled healing. Like I was done,
Oh,
I was gone. It was behind me, oh, in the rearview mirror.
yes.
And I was just living this secular life, and I was having a great time. And I thought I didn't need to, when I left, because I'm old, so that was, decades ago,
Hmm.
there was no concept really of deconstructing and of
Right. It's not as common as it is today with the way we're talking about it online and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was certainly no online anything. So I'd never met other ex-Adventists. So I
Yeah.
had nobody to talk to about what I might have gone through. So I just like threw it all over my shoulder and went on with life. And then I realized when I started really deconstructing, 5, 6, whatever years ago that was, that largely I had been repeating a lot of my religious programming, my cult programming in my secular life, and
Wow.
I needed to deal with that. So I went into therapy and just all the things, wrote the book and
Yeah.
figured it
Wh-
all out.
What did that look like that you seem to be repeating the patterns? Was that in relationships or what was that?
It was in relationships mostly. I mean, I would say it was just in my entire relationship with the world.
Okay.
High control religions like cults, like the Seventh-day Adventist Church,
Yeah.
um, teach you to not trust your gut.
Yes.
Your doubts and anything are from the devil. You're always supposed to look for external direction.
Oh,
You're
interesting.
supposed to obey, submit, particularly for women, of course,
Hmm.
obey, submit, be pleasing and people pleasing, all of those things.
Yeah.
And so I never learned that I was entitled to boundaries, right? When you're
Right.
raised in a religion like that,
Yeah.
boundaries are bad. You don't tell anyone no. And
Right.
so I had been people pleasing my entire life. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to make a boundary with, the person at the grocery store, let alone the
Yeah.
my partner, right?
Right.
And so that, but then also, of course, specific to relationships, there was the submission and obedience stuff where I just uh was in a series of abusive relationships
Okay.
because narcissistic abuse particularly, because I was taught to submit to men and
Yeah.
taught to obey and go along and not stand up for myself. And even in my second marriage was not abusive,
Hmm.
but I still didn't know how to communicate my needs. I didn't even know how to find my feelings or my needs, let
I
alone
was,
express them,
yeah, I was
because they'd
gonna
always been
say,
forbidden.
right. I was gonna say, did you even, you don't even know yourself really, and I
Yeah.
completely understand that because I have deconstructed my religion. And once I started doing that, then my marriage and then my family and then my friendships. And it's like
Right.
all of it kind of collapsed, which is a good thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because we start to be true to ourselves, it's a
Right.
good thing. And that was the thing for me was I didn't even know who I was.
Yes.
It's like, who am I? Who knows what I want? And I have a friend, and I always bring her up because I love what she said. She said people were telling her, well, now you can go figure out what you want to do. And she's like, what does that even mean? Like, what do you
Right.
mean? What is that? What do I do? So it's
Totally.
so interesting, right? Because, and especially if you've been taught, like you were saying, you've been taught, and listen, I was in a high control religion as well, not like that, but we're bordering the cult,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and it's not that my own thoughts were demonic, but I needed to pray more if I had certain thoughts. I
Right.
wasn't, I had to submit more. I stayed and prayed in my abusive marriage for
Yes.
decades. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You
Yeah.
know the drill on that one. You stay and
Um,
pray so that you can do the right thing.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's an odd thing that I don't know if in your religion it was
Uh-huh.
that way, but we weren't uh, only a very narrow slice of feelings were okay. Basically just joy and sweetness. And my
Yeah.
family was my mother particularly was very controlling that way also. So
Okay.
um no bad feelings allowed. The
Yeah.
Seventh-day Adventists have a prophet. Her name was Ellen G. White, and she literally said in her writings, like, children who are grumpy or she had a word for it, not even bad, but
Uh-huh.
children who express strong feelings will ruin heaven for everyone. So as children, we were taught you are going to be the destruction of everyone around you if you express a bad
Yes.
feeling.
Yeah.
And so,
So
you know,
learning self-abandonment immediately.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it's so strange, right? Because it wasn't to that extent, but yes, like if you were in a bad mood or you were crabby or there was something, what I learned about my anger
Yeah,
when I learned boundaries was like, oh, that's why I was angry because people were crossing over my boundaries that I didn't even know I wanted to have because I wasn't allowed to have boundaries. I didn't know what boundaries were. And I was
yep,
in a narcissistic marriage. So, of course, there were no boundaries.
right.
And so, but that's how my lack of boundaries was manifesting was anger. I was a very
Um,
angry person. So instead of really learning how to dive into that,
yeah,
um, I needed to pray more and I needed to change my attitude and stuff like that. So
yeah.
self-abandoning right away, which is horrible. And the thing that gets me is that God has, if we're following God in any way, he created all these emotions and feelings. And
Right. I think the churches tend to forget that. Yeah,
they do.
they just want to use just the easy parts and forget all the whole spectrum.
Yes.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that whole anger, because I think if you had asked anyone at various points of my life, they would have said I was a very angry,
Mm, yeah.
ferocious person. But that was exactly what it was, is like I would let boundaries be crossed all in all and just go along and pretend everything was fine until I
Yes.
had just absolutely had it and couldn't take it anymore. And then I would blow up.
That's
And
it.
often
Yeah.
the target of it wouldn't be prepared because I didn't give any cues leading up to it.
Right.
Everything was fine. Everything was fine. Oh, we're just happy, happy. And then I would blow up. And at that point, it was just scorched earth. I had reached the point where there was no going back,
Yeah.
and so, and people would always be like, well, why can't we talk about it, or why can't, and it would be like, no, it's too far gone now.
Right.
um and I never learned to communicate or even identify
Yeah.
those marker points where you're supposed to communicate, you're supposed to
Right.
talk, you're supposed to feel and express those
Well,
feelings.
and it's hard, right? When we're being taught that our feelings don't matter anyway, what we want doesn't matter anyway. We're supposed to be following, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's hard because I think for me, as I started to unravel all of this, figuring out my anger, actually just all started happening when I started setting boundaries. I'm like, oh, this explains so much of my life, why I was so angry, why I never wanted to tell somebody, hey, this is what I need as a boundary, whatever it
Yeah.
was, because they would just tell me you're being too difficult. That's not how we're doing it. Why can't you just let things go? All the things that are so toxic or narcissistic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can remember people when I was younger would call me fake. And I couldn't figure out why, because to me,
Oh,
fake meant like I was pretending to be something I wasn't, like I was pretending to be rich when I wasn't, or I was
okay.
claiming to be, English when I was American, like that's what I thought fake
Yeah.
was. And now, of course, looking back, I'm like, people were picking up on that. I was not in touch with my feelings at all. I was always
Wow.
happy. I was always, everything was great.
Everything's
And that,
great.
yeah, that was the fake thing that people would pick up on, and they were right. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that I wasn't being genuine, because it was just so, like you said, when you're a child and you're taught to self-abandon,
Yeah.
um, that was the only reality I knew about myself. And
Right.
so it's
And we
a
don't even realize that we're self-abandoning.
right.
It's just how we're taught. And so if you're listening right now and you feel like this is happening to you, right? And maybe you're getting some introspection right now,
Yeah.
it's so subtle because we do it I know as I was growing up, I know I was like, if I'm quiet or if I'm good, then there won't be
Mhm.
problems and I
Right.
won't get in trouble and I won't do this and I won't do that. And so that's how you just start self-abandoning. I'm telling
That's
you,
it.
like I always say, I'm only, 3.5 years old because I've never been this person before because
Yeah.
boundaries changed my life, which I'm sure they did for you too. It's like
Yeah.
once you start to understand yourself
Yep.
and love yourself, really, which you have to really completely learn that, don't you? Because
You
like we were
do.
saying, you don't even know who you are. How can you even love yourself when you've never been taught that? You've
Yeah.
never been taught to even acknowledge yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And you're taught often that it's bad to do that. So it's wrong to do it. Not only just do you not know how,
Yeah.
but shame on you for even thinking you should, and so you got to go through
Yes.
all that stuff too. It's I mean, I think I will be working on boundaries for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It's it- you can't just flip the switch. It's still, I will find myself sometimes
Yeah.
just going with because it's easier and I don't want to make problems. And then it's like, no, this is
Right.
crossing my boundary,
Yes, exactly. I know it is. Well, it takes practice, right? Especially if we spent decades not doing it. I mean, I didn't
Right,
learn boundaries until I was in my 50s,
right.
really. Every once in a while, I think I would give, but I didn't really understand boundaries because when I was a people pleaser, I thought boundaries were telling other people what to do. And it's like, it's not. It's,
Right.
what are we going to do? Right.
Yes.
What am I going to do if they don't change or if
Yeah.
they continue with this behavior? And I did not know how to do that because, of course, like probably you heard too, you're difficult,
Right.
you're being disobedient,
Selfish. Yeah.
selfish. That's the
Mm.
thing that people, I think I can tell like where their boundary scale is when they're like, it's selfish to think about yourself. It's really not. I mean,
It's
my poor mom never sitting down to have a hot meal, those kinds of, she was always
yeah.
at the stove, like those kinds of things. And I hated that kind of stuff. I hated
Yep.
that it's like, we should all be able to sit down together if we want to, rather than her having to be up or whatever the
Yeah.
situation is,
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
this, saying these are my needs,
Yep.
which we haven't been taught that. And people are saying, oh, you're so difficult. Why do you have to be that way?
Yep.
How was the so you were getting a lot of DMs when you started talking about it online.
Right.
And then where were you recording these survivor stories? Were you just where were you recording them?
I did two things. It seemed so important to me since the church wasn't paying attention to all of these victims it was creating.
Yeah.
I just started a Word document and I started two of them.
Wow.
One that was the public cases that had been adjudicated or
Hmm.
processed in some way publicly. And then this other document that was all of those cases plus just anything people told me. So the ones that just, I couldn't prove because there was no news source on it, but
Yeah.
this person told me that story and they deserve to be believed and heard.
Right.
Um, and so I didn't know what I was going to do with those lists. I just wanted to bear witness to
Yeah, I
the
love that.
and to
Yeah.
like, build to almost kind of reassure myself
Hmm.
um that this really was a problem. I wasn't just talking about it because I had an issue, because of course I would get all these haters
Of
online who were
course.
like, you
Yeah.
just hate the church. You hate
Yes.
it,
You're so bitter.
Yeah, you're so bitter, right? Bitter, of course. And so, as the documents grew to 9 pages, 13 pages, et cetera, it was just my own personal proof of like, no, you need to keep going with this. There's something here. And then eventually those lists did help me. There is now a huge lawsuit against the church
Wow.
that the lawyers had reached out to me because I was the most public face and they were like, can you help us? And so I was able to help with those lists. So it ended up being, a
That's
great thing that I had
amazing.
done this.
Yes, that's
But
amazing. I want to
and
ask you about when you were talking to others, because I know how I felt. So I want to ask you how you felt hearing those stories and then comparing them to your experience. How were you feeling? I mean, was it just so validating?
it was so validating. I feel like I'm in a really special position to hold space. I hate that term, but I mean it is so applicable here to hold space for these victims because I was a victim of certainly religious abuse and then narcissistic abuse in relationships, et cetera. But I was never a victim of sexual abuse as a child.
Okay.
And so I think I am able to absorb those stories without being personally triggered. And I will tell those stories publicly for people who want their story heard, but
Yeah.
then, they can't do it themselves. They don't want to.
Right.
And so of course it's traumatic. I mean, there are certain stories that I tell that I cry every single time. They just get me. But it isn't, again, personally triggering. It just
Yes,
triggers
of
my
course.
human empathy.
Right.
Like
Yes, I
any decent
understand.
human would be.
Yes.
So it's hard, it's
Yeah.
exhausting and emotionally difficult,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's something that I can contribute because that wasn't being a child sexual abuse victim was not my personal story.
Right. Me either. And so that, but I hold space for them as well, and I've had people on my show talking about that because abuse is abuse and the patterns are so similar. And
Exactly.
so I want to give them a place to talk about it.
Yeah.
And, the thing for me, I don't know if you feel this way. It was so crazy to me when I would say to my producer, I'd say, like, it's so healing to
Yeah.
be talking to these people about this. I'm talking about abuse all day and it's so healing. And
Yes.
it's wild to me. I don't know if you felt that way.
Oh, very, very much. It is so healing, and obviously silence doesn't help anyone. And
No.
so, getting things out, it just feels like you're helping heal not only them and you, but just like the world in general by some tiny piece.
Yes.
And
There's
then
a
for
ripple.
me,
There's a
yeah,
ripple effect. I really believe that. There's a
yeah,
ripple effect for us being the voice for people who don't want to use their voice. Like
yeah,
I will stand on that every single day of my
yeah,
life. I will be the like you just said, I will tell your story if you don't want to tell it
yeah.
because it deserves to be told because silence only protects abusers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's you know, particularly healing for me in part of my book and part of my story was that my father was an abuser of others,
Mm.
not of us.
Oh,
And as a church pastor. And
okay.
so I can't do anything about that case
Yeah.
because it was as I was born when I was a tiny baby. But I can help other victims, and so I can help to heal that trauma, that generational trauma that
Mm.
I was cursed with,
Yeah.
by holding space for other victims. So.
Yeah. And who told you, how did you learn about him abusing?
Um, it was an interesting thing. We grew up thinking that my mother was really awful. She was super hyper controlling and abusive, and
Okay.
I got beaten and spanked and whatever by her. And so I always thought my mom was the bad guy, and my dad was just magic. He
Uh,
wasn't around a lot, he worked a lot, but he was just funny and sweet and warm, and we just
mhm.
loved my dad. And then when I was about 35 or so, um, he had retired from most of my life. He had been a doctor, and I knew that he had been a pastor in the Adventist church way before, like when I was a
Oh,
child,
okay.
but I'd never really experienced that part of it. And so when he retired from medicine, he went back to being a pastor for the Adventist church. And his original victim from way back when I was a baby came forward to the church and said, "You cannot let this man be in power anymore, in a position of power."
Mm.
And so the church removed him mostly
Wow.
from power at that point. And so he had to call all of us kids and tell us, I'm being removed from my position because of my history. And so we heard it from him, but he
Wow.
didn't really give us much detail. And he only told us about one victim. And of course, where there are predators like that, there are always more than
Yeah.
one victim because they are not rehabilitatable, particularly when churches don't do anything but promote them. um,
Right.
which
Or
is what happened with
move
him.
them to another,
Move them
another
yep,
church or something.
that's exactly what they did with him,
Oh,
several times. And they actually ordained him after 2 episodes. So
gosh.
it's just ridiculous. But so then nobody would talk about it after that initial, like, he called us, told us, and then nobody in my family, nobody anywhere that I knew of talked about it
Mhm.
ever again. And I discovered the identity of his first, at least as far as we know, first victim
Yeah.
purely by accident. And I wrote to her and just said, hey,
Wow.
I feel like I've been lied to by my
Mm.
family, by the church, by everything. And you may not want to talk to me. And if so, that's okay. But I'd really like some answers, and I don't know who else to turn to. And
Yeah.
she and I, that was about 20 years ago or 15 years ago or so. And 20. And she and I have been good friends ever since. And
Wow. That's
so
amazing.
yeah, it was very, I mean, talk about healing, I think,
Yeah,
for both of us. And it was hard. Sometimes we went for a couple of years without speaking because it was just too raw. One or the other of us was just having a really hard time processing.
of course.
But now I think we're in a good place. She blessed
Mm.
the book and her part in my
Oh,
story. And I feel really fortunate to have that connection.
that's amazing. It's such a silver lining to such a horrible thing,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
It
Yeah.
really is. So, one of the things that I think you and I had talked about before was, okay, you had a dangerous decade-long partnership with a man
Yes.
diagnosed with cluster B personality disorder. You
Yes.
escaped, you deprogrammed, and then you wrote the book. Is that the order of how things happened?
Well, my first husband when I mean I met him just 3 or 4 years after I left the church. He was
Okay.
very a narcissist completely. I wasn't allowed to have a car. He
Oh,
wouldn't let me see my friends and family. Of course, I had no idea that he was my first serious relationship, and I just thought this is the way adults must interact. I
yeah.
just didn't know anything. And the church had been so controlling, and my mother had been so controlling, so I just slipped right into this.
How do you know
Horrible.
otherwise, really?
How do you know otherwise? Yeah. But so that was about a 10-year marriage or so. And I didn't realize when I left him for my second husband, who was so fun and so like, not controlling. He was just the fun I had been missing all under the thumb of the first husband. And
Yeah.
so I didn't really realize why I left the first husband, other than I just felt like my whole 20s had just been lived under a rock, and I had been so controlled. And so then I went into this fun marriage, had kids, and I just didn't know myself yet. I didn't know what I
Yeah.
was doing. So then Mr. Cluster B came along, and
Jeez.
I left the fun marriage, which, we had lots of, I mean, communication problems and things, but it wasn't an abusive
Yeah.
relationship at all. And I fell just straight hook, line, and sinker for Mr. Cluster B because that was familiar,
Yes.
that felt
Yes.
like what I knew.
Yeah.
And it was very, almost seductive. I mean, he was very seductive. Of course, narcissists often are, right?
Yes. Yes.
But and I almost kind of fetishized being
Mm-hmm.
that submissive and abused
Mm-hmm.
because to me it was kind of like, oh, this is the way the church treated me, this is the way I was raised,
Hmm.
look at me, make it kind of outrageous,
Yeah, like you get to control the situation.
right, even though of course I wasn't controlling anything about it, but I
Right.
thought I was,
Yes,
and that I was
exactly.
being so witty in my, I'm such a feminist that look, I can take all the abuse and I can,
Yeah.
and that was a really, in hindsight, very dangerous
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it. And that was part of getting online during COVID, was discovering the hashtag narcissistic abuse. And again, like because blah, 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 the religion we were raised in did not believe in psychology.
Right.
It was from the devil. You
Yes.
weren't supposed to, you just need to pray harder, like,
Yes.
pray harder.
Yes. Yes.
And so my knowledge of narcissism at that point, 5, 6 years ago, was still like, I knew the Greek myth, right? Oh, Narcissus
Yes.
sat by the lake and stared at himself because he thought he was so beautiful that he
Right.
died looking at himself. And I was like, oh, okay, so narcissists are people who think that they're really good looking. I didn't
Right.
know what the
Exactly.
whole thing was. And
Exactly.
so I discovered what narcissism was online. And from there, I just went. And at that point, I was finally in therapy. And so I would start telling my therapist about how Mr. Cluster B was treating me.
Yeah.
And she was like, that's displaying all of the signs of,
Hmm.
Cluster B, which is the four distinct personality types.
Yeah.
Looked them up, and I mean, he checked every single box on all four personality disorders. And I asked him about it as we were breaking up, and he, typical narcissist thing, he was like, well, I told you that I failed the armed forces um psychological uh
Really?
and of course he had never told me that, never,
Yes.
but
But they always say, "Oh, I told you that this,
right,
this, and this." That's how
right,
they always talk. It's so
yeah.
aggravating.
Yeah, because then of course it was my fault that I had fallen for him because he told me, and
Yes. I
and it's like,
warned
no,
you.
you never told me.
Right.
Um, but and when he was talking about having failed the armed services psych evaluation, cluster B had not even been officially designated,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
he I asked him about it and just said, have you ever been diagnosed with these? And it was that classic narcissist. There's just this certain denial where it's true. And,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know, and,
And you have to ask it a certain way because
mhm,
sometimes if you don't, did you fail it or whatever you said, it's like
right.
they can manipulate. No, I didn't. I didn't
Yeah.
fail it or
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
but they probably there were some issues. There was a concern or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, he had fully admitted that he had failed the psych evaluation, but
Wow.
when I asked him about the specific diagnoses,
Yeah.
there was a lot of waffling, but
Yeah. Of course. And
yeah.
listen, I think we should talk about that a little bit, because, you know, people want me to give them a checklist. And it's like, I'm not giving you a checklist. Like, how are you
No.
being treated? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not giving you, because also I've had women in my DMs who said, yeah, he's been diagnosed and he uses it to his advantage because he'll be like, well, I'm a narcissist.
Yeah.
So it's not going to heal anything in your marriage. They're still,
Right.
except now that they actually are a narcissist. And so it
Right.
doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if they get diagnosed cluster B,
Yeah.
psychopath. It doesn't matter. Nothing's going to
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
Do you want to live in a world like this with
Right.
them treating you this way? Because they won't change because they
Yeah.
don't think they're doing anything wrong. And
No.
so they don't change. And
Yeah.
your story is so funny because it was so similar to me. Like I said the word gaslighting. I don't even know where I learned the word gaslighting. And
Yeah.
I said the word gaslighting probably too many times, and the algorithm goes, here, have some
Yes.
narcissistic abuse. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh shit, this is what's
Right?
been going on. Yeah, thank God
It's
for
like
that
it
kind of thing.
literally is just a jaw-dropping, stomach-dropping moment when you just like I can remember like just reading down all the stuff and like,
Yeah,
oh my God, there's a name for this. There's a, it's not just my inability to deal with him or
yeah,
him being,
exactly.
or even just him being mean. It's so much more than that,
Yeah.
and all the ups and downs and all of that. Just
The coercive control, and that's a thing, is that, and we're starting to learn a lot more about that now, but coercive control is that insidious part, that
right.
little drip, one little bit at a time, one little backhanded compliment, one little, you don't get to have a car, one little,
Yeah. Yeah.
one of my guests talked about how she had a flip phone, like,
Uh,
but he had a smartphone, but she got to have a flip phone.
yeah.
And that was all she was allowed. It's
Yeah.
like those kinds of things. Um,
Totally.
I did a video about I said, what's one of the first things you did after you left the narcissist? And they were heartbreaking. I'm not going to name all of them, but some of them were like that. I bought a phone.
Oh,
I called my parents because I hadn't been allowed to talk to them,
yes.
things like that. And
Yeah.
that's the part where you don't when people don't understand coercive control. Plus, Melissa, I'm sure this happened to you, maybe. Tell me if it did. They don't always just come straight out and say you can't go see them.
Oh, right. Yeah,
No.
exactly.
They
Exactly.
make you feel bad for wanting to go see them or wanting to have a car or wanting to go to lunch with your girlfriends, those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yep, exactly. My first husband would have panic attacks anytime we were in a social situation. He
Oh,
never had panic attacks any other a time other than at like he could do his work. We could go to his work parties, and he was fabulous. He was,
oh,
but if I wanted to go to like my family's Christmas or to a party with my friends, there
yeah,
would be panic attack, and then how could I do this to him, that, and so it would be so miserable, then I would stop doing it because I
yeah,
just didn't want to tolerate. Um, and
that's
then
hard.
with Mr. Cluster B, I don't know if you had, but
Hmm.
sleep deprivation was a
Yeah,
thing that he would use he had some bad health problems. And so he would be up all night long, and just like we lived in a little studio at that time, and like slamming doors of the cabinets
yeah,
at 2 a.m. or whatever because he was up and and of course, if I was like, dude, I have to work tomorrow, I have to get up
yes,
at 5 a.m., it was, well, at least you don't feel as sick as I, blah, blah, blah. How can you
yes,
be
exactly.
so, mean
Why
about,
don't you care about me
yeah,
and
why
that
don't
I
you care
can't
about me?
sleep or what it doesn't matter what it is. It's always going to be your fault. It
Right,
doesn't matter what
right.
it is, it's going to be your
Hmm.
fault. So the way that he sleep deprived me is we would like knock down, drag out, fight right
Ah,
before bed. And
yes.
then what do? They get it. Well, a lot of them do. They get in bed, fall asleep. Like
Fall asleep.
within seconds, because they're all done.
Yeah.
They wipe their hands of it and they go to sleep. And then I would be literally sitting in the living room sobbing for hours, journaling because I had to journal all about I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better tomorrow. These are the ways that I have to work on things. And listen, when I went back through my journals, I'm like, Lordy, Lordy, this man has been a narcissist our entire marriage. Everything was
Yeah.
my fault.
Yes. Oh my gosh, totally. Um, I don't know if you had this experience, but it seems like they all use the same playbook, and
They
that's what's
do.
so fascinating.
It is.
Is along with the sleep deprivation, he would talk in his sleep. And that was
Oh,
his not only way of waking me up all the time, but he could say things that he knew he couldn't get away with in real life, right?
wow.
And then if I would like he would talk about cheating on me, or he would say nasty things about me, or he would say in the very beginning, of course, during the love bombing stage, it was all wonderful things. He would be talking about how much he loved me, and he spoke a really interesting language, and he would speak in that language, so I'd be like, oh, what is he saying?
My
And I'd be
God.
so seduced. And
Yeah.
he would practice proposing to me, and so I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so
So
amazing.
manipulative.
And then
Wow.
yeah, and then in the end of the relationship, it would be saying nasty things about me or my parenting or my this or my that,
Yeah.
or just he was cheating or whatever. And then of course, I mean, it's the perfect narcissistic manipulation thing, because if I talked to him about it when he was awake in the morning,
Yeah.
how can I be responsible for what I said when I'm sleeping? I don't know what I said when I'm asleep. How
Yeah.
stupid of you to actually listen to that and
Yeah.
believe it and whatever. And I mean, it's pretty diabolical. It's
It
really.
really is. And this is the thing that we have to understand. And I say this, and I've said this on shows when people say, like, well, they don't know what they're doing. Hell yeah, they do.
Oh, they
They
do.
know
They
exactly
do.
what they're doing because he does not go around abusing everybody.
Right.
He's
Right.
only abusing who he wants to abuse.
Ooh.
And that's
Yeah.
usually like
Yeah.
you are the target. So if he's like on a vacation and say he's sharing a room with his friend or whatever,
Right.
I doubt he's like cussing his bro
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
in the night or something.
Yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Exactly. Oh, totally. And yeah. it just so I learned toward the end when I was just fed up with it, but I didn't have my escape route planned yet.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was starting to just, and so I would tell him in the mornings just to amuse myself. I would tell him what he said in the night,
Okay.
and I would say exactly everything that he said, but I would add one untrue thing, and he would always pick out, I never said that. And it's
Oh,
like, oh,
see,
honey, and I never told him what I was doing. It was just purely to prove to myself, yes, he knows what he's
he
doing.
knows
It's
what he's doing.
intentional, it's manipulative,
Yeah. And that reminds me of I used to sleepwalk and sleep talk.
mm,
And now I know that it was, all of my stress, because I
yeah,
was very and that was part of it because I don't do that anymore, amazingly. But I mean, I don't sleep with anybody in my bed, so who knows but I don't think I do. My cat hasn't said anything.
Mhm.
But he would in the morning, he'd be like, you were talking in your sleep. And I'd be like, oh gosh. Okay, well, because then I'd think about like, okay, what's my anxiety? I never really
Yeah.
pinpointed it to him because everything was my fault and my problem, right? And he would tell me things I was saying. This reminds me of like what you went through, but like opposite. So he would tell me things I was saying, and then he'd get mad at me for saying them. And I'd be
Um,
like, but I really don't even like, I didn't remember saying any of those things, right? Because I'm in an
yeah,
anxiety induced sleepwalking and sleep
right,
talking.
right.
And he would make me responsible for those things. Now, of
Yeah.
course, frankly, if I did say terrible things about him, it was probably my subconscious because
Right, exactly. He deserved
because
it.
because I needed to talk to somebody, so I was going to say it in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
But there's no way to meet that goal, right?
right.
And that's the thing that they like to do. They're going to move the goalposts, and I'd be
Yep.
like, okay, I'll work on it, and it's like, I'll work on what, And
Yeah,
so I would be scared to go to sleep
yeah.
because
Yes,
I
right.
didn't want to get in trouble. So now there's a new way to sleep deprive you.
Sleep deprive you. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh,
And
they
all
do
it does is
exactly.
elevate your anxiety, and then you're messed up for the next day and everything. You're so grumpy, you're so crabby.
Right.
There's just something about you, and you're not fun anymore. All those things, when it's like it's all the coercive control. It's like one little bit at a time
Yeah.
manipulating your entire life.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. And, looking back on it, you can see all of the little things like when we first got together and we were first living together, my first birthday that came around,
Yeah.
um when I was a child, we didn't really, I mean, we celebrated birthdays. It wasn't forbidden, but we never had birthday parties or
Oh,
anything. So
okay.
I never really cared about people remember,
Yeah.
noticing my birthday or not. But the first year that came around while we were together, he didn't. We woke up, we went through half the day. He never said happy birthday. He never said anything. And
Oh,
I just went sailing along. I'm sure I was really disappointed underneath. I can't imagine that I wasn't, but I was kind of used to it not being a big deal. So I just went on with the day. And I was sometime in the early afternoon, he started going, gosh, it's somebody's birthday today, and I just forget whose. I think it's one of my sisters or something. I don't know.
so
And I let it
terrible.
go for a while and he would circle back to it. I just feel like I'm forgetting something today. And eventually I said, it's actually my birthday. And he was like, oh gosh, how do you know? And he never forgot it again
Mm,
because he realized he couldn't push my buttons. He hadn't
right.
been able to hurt me. He hadn't been able to kick up a stink and whatever. He
Yeah.
needed the drama or whatever it was, or
Yeah.
he needed the control of hurting me.
Yeah.
And I just hadn't been hurt by it. It just didn't really faze me. And so that that manipulation technique was immediately off his list, and he never tried it again because it hadn't worked, you know?
I mean, listen, there are some things that do work, but you know how they are. They'll find
Yeah.
something else to treat you. That
Oh,
doesn't mean it's going to get better. That just means they're changing the game plan,
that's it. Yeah, he
to
just moved on
something
to
else.
other things, but
Yes,
that
he'll
one,
go. Yeah, he'll go
yeah,
mess with you some other way.
yeah, yeah.
In the last bit of our conversation, I want to talk about what it looked like for you to deprogram yourself. Where was that in relation to this relationship? And did it like all kind of start falling apart at once? What did that
It,
look like?
yeah, it really did. I mean, the the stuff with my dad and my book and deconstructing the religion
Yeah.
and realizing this relationship was so toxic and damaging and potentially very dangerous.
Hmm.
It all happened right around the same time. I think COVID probably played into it because we were stuck together 24/7. And
So many
I
of us
was,
lost our marriages during COVID, and
that's
we're
it.
we're
I
like,
was
we have to
on,
spend 24 hours a day with this person. I don't think I like them enough.
yeah, right. Well, and just all the stuff I was learning, all those hashtags about narcissistic abuse and
Yes,
deconstruction and everything. I just found
yes.
all these communities that were talking about things in my life, the religious
Yeah.
trauma and the narcissistic abuse. And I just realized that there were names for things and that there were people studying it. And there was, so then I got my religious trauma therapist, but then she was like, okay, this relationship is also a major problem. So we're dealing with this and we're dealing with this and let's talk. And so it all just came
Yeah.
crashing down at once. And I had to, I mean, I was experiencing feelings for the first time, sort of. I was letting myself cry. I was letting myself
Yeah.
just lay in bed and feel like, oh my gosh, this is horrifying.
Yeah.
And I had never allowed any of that. I had just kept it all together. And so then shortly after COVID ended and I was sort of putting all these pieces together,
Hmm.
um, I we were he and I were living in kind of a shared housing-ish situation, and the landlord kicked me out. And he assumed that he was going to go with me. And I assumed so too. I just kind of figured that I literally was just chained to him for life, even though I wanted out of that relationship so
Yeah.
bad. And
Yeah.
it was just, oh my gosh. I mean, I can still feel it in my chest of just
I'm
like
sure.
how miserable it was.
Hmm.
And I knew at that point, I knew he was a narcissist. We'd had that conversation about failing the test and all of that and his cluster B
Right.
personality disorders, but I just didn't think I was ever going to escape him. And when I got kicked out of that housing, I was like, wow, how am I going to find anyone else who will put up with him and all of his, so like, where am I going to rent a house and whatever? Because he just caused so many problems all the time.
Oh,
And my therapist was like, this is your chance. You have been given a
wow.
gift by being kicked out. Do not take him with you. And I was just like, oh,
Can I do
have
that?
to. I can do that.
Am I allowed?
Exactly. I was just like,
Yeah, this is why trauma-informed therapy is so imperative. Like,
yeah,
do not go to a regular therapist who's going to tell you to try and reconcile or make things work.
that's
No.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. It was earth shattering. And so I literally did. I just said, you are not going with me. And I moved, and oh boy, he pulled out all those tricks of,
Yeah.
he caused himself health problems and
Yeah.
oh, excuse me. See, I get all choked up still thinking about it. But boy, he tried, and the love bombing and
Yeah,
and then
of
the
course.
rages and the threats and
Yeah.
everything just over and over. But I was done and I was out. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I spent probably 2 years of just I I ended up having to apologize to one of my neighbors in the new place that I moved because she tried so hard to like welcome me to the neighborhood and things like that. And I just couldn't even talk to people. I couldn't like for like
Yeah.
a year and a half, I just was just by myself, just I couldn't deal, just
Right.
deconstructing and putting myself back together emotionally and
Yeah.
learning boundaries and all those
I mean,
things.
you're becoming a completely new person.
Yeah.
And I know that's probably sounding scary for some people who are listening, but I'm telling you, this is the most amazing opportunity you are going to be given. It does not matter what age. I have people in their 70s in my comments who are like, I just left. I just recently
Oh,
left. And it's like, Because if we're not dead, we're not done, and we're not promised tomorrow anyway. So
That's
it's
it.
like we might as well live. Like some people are like, I'm going to run out the clock. I'm like, that's the worst thing. We're not living to like 65 like it used to
Yeah.
be, a long
Yeah.
time ago, right? We're living a long time. Especially a lot of us who are taking care of our health. It's like we're living a long time. I have
Yeah.
longevity in my family.
Yeah.
He has longevity in his family. And I was like, am I doing this for another 40 years? Because I won't survive it.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
I'd rather do it alone. And that's the thing is you probably learned this too. You don't actually do anything alone. You get to find new friends in a new community and all those things. And you're
yeah.
never really alone unless you want to be, which I love to be.
That's it. Exactly. I mean, I am just enjoying, I've never been without a relationship without a man in my life since I was 22. And
Yeah.
so like it is glorious. It's wonderful. I can be with people when I want to, and otherwise I'm still getting to know myself and just
Yes.
it's so wonderful. So yeah, if people are listening and yeah, don't because I was there just thinking I'll let the clock run out. I even
Right.
said to my friends and people like, well, I guess I just have to wait for him to die. He was older than
Right.
I was and he had health problems. And I was like,
Yeah.
because I don't see how I'm ever going to be free of this.
Right.
And oh my gosh, that's not what you want to do. You
Yeah.
you want to get out.
Yeah, there's resources and we'll put some resources.
Yes.
I have an escape plan on my resource list and
Yes.
so that way people can check the steps and see, but whatever you do, it's got to be strategic
Yes.
and very quiet. It
Mhm.
I was not in physical danger and it didn't matter. There were a lot of things I didn't tell him, even though, my gosh, I had been trained for 3 decades to tell him every single thing.
Right.
It's so funny. You said I was just done. And that's how I felt too. Like when I was done, I was done. And he was trying to tell me, like, we lived together for the 6 weeks we were divorcing
Yes.
and, just like packing up the house and all that stuff. And he was telling me a story. And I literally held my hand up and I said, I don't care. And I stood up and I left the room. And he goes, what the hell is wrong with you? Ah, whatever he was
Mhm.
yelling at me. Right. And I said, I don't care. I've actually never cared about your stories, but now that we're getting a divorce, I don't ever have to sit and listen to one of your stupid stories ever again. He was so furious. He's like, what's gotten into you? And I'm like, I don't know, divorce.
Common sense.
Common sense. It's the best thing I've ever done. It's like, should have done this sooner. To me, it
Totally.
was like such a disobedience, right?
There you go.
To
Exactly.
say something
Yeah.
like that. So, so tell us a little bit. We only have a few more minutes, but
Oh,
tell us
yeah.
a little bit about what your book is about so that
Oh,
we can
yeah.
send people that way if they'd like to read it.
Yes, absolutely. It is my story of basically everything we've kind of talked about of leaving the religion early in life and thinking that I was so healed and magical and I went on to all these fun things. I worked for the Kennedys, I worked for Wall Street guys. I had this great life, I thought.
Yeah.
And but then realizing in middle age when we got that call from my dad. That was the first wake up. And
Oh,
I was
okay.
like, oh my gosh, got to deal with the religious piece. Finding my dad's victim, I call her Dr. Z in the book.
Yeah.
Dr. Z really helped push me towards you got to look at the church. You can't just look at your personal,
I love
story.
that. Yeah.
And then discovering through that slow process that the church had just groomed me to be the perfect victim for
Yeah.
narcissistic abuse and other kinds of abuse, the submission and the obedience and the don't listen to your
Right.
gut and don't believe in yourself, you're
Yeah.
being selfish, and all of that stuff was the programming I'd had from the very beginning. And it had ended up putting me in an incredibly toxic, dangerous situation, 5 decades later, 4 decades later. Um, and so then how I finally healed from that and came to own myself.
I
And it
love
was a
it.
process of learning to be disobedient.
I love it. Yay. I love that. I love that so much. And the shoot, I'm trying to think what you said, and I'm gonna have Jen, my producer, is gonna cut this out if I don't remember what I said, because we're not gonna leave this part in, Jen. um, Oh, I remember now. Okay, but cut that other part out. When you were saying like that you just thought you were gonna walk away and everything's good. I tell you, I felt the same exact way leaving my marriage. I was like, oh, I'm getting rid of the problem.
Yep.
Everything's gonna be great. Tomorrow, new day, waking up, healed completely.
Right.
you know,
Right.
and I'm so type A anyway, so I was like, come on, healing, let's go, let's go.
Right.
And
Right.
hurry up.
Mhm.
And I had friends, thank God for healthy friends, who were also had been in abuse, in their
Yeah.
first marriages or first relationships or whatever, and said, you're actually going to be grieving your marriage, and you got a lot to unravel. And I was like, what?
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
such a
Really?
wake-up call.
Do I have to?
So I think it's a good thing that we talked about it today, because you can't just walk away, because your problems do come with you.
That's
And you may not have noticed it, like I didn't notice, like you didn't notice, Melissa. At first you didn't notice. It's like your problems come with you. The
yep.
your old patterns, the things
Yeah.
you've been taught, either in a good way or a bad way, whatever you've been
Yeah.
taught, we've learned these things. They don't always
Yeah.
serve us. And that's why
That's
we
it.
have to make sure that we go. And if you're leaving any kind of abuse, you've been in a trauma, you need to see a trauma informed therapist. And then, of
Yes.
course, you can also see coaches who have done this kind of work too. It's so
Right.
helpful. And reading all the different things is so helpful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, do all of it. I think all of it. I have two therapists right now, and I'm reading
Yes.
all the books and all the everything. And
Yes.
it's a process, but that's what I always tell people. Leaving does not equal healing. And that's leaving a religion or leaving a
Yeah.
relationship, leaving a toxic family. It doesn't matter. Leaving does not equal healing. You have to do a lot of work, and you
Yeah.
have to really consciously process it and probably continue working on it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for being here. My gosh, what an
Yeah.
interesting story. It's been so helpful. And I'm going to put everything in the show notes, you guys. So just scroll on down and you'll see all the information. I'm going to put your Substack, which I'm
Okay.
guessing you're still writing and talking
Yeah.
about all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm going to put your
Absolutely.
Substack and your Instagram and your TikTok so everybody can go and connect with you. And we will also, which I don't have a link, but we will get a link for your book
Oh
so
yeah.
that
Oh,
it's
here,
also, yeah,
let me
please hold
just
it up.
show people the book.
Yes,
There
I
you
love it.
go. And then we'll link to it too.
Yes, we will definitely link to it so that way you guys can check it out. Of course, it's always great to support our guests, and my followers will do that, of course, please.
Oh,
And then if anything resonated with you today, guys, please reach out to Melissa or me. Please leave some comments on YouTube, and always leave a review on Apple or Spotify so that way we can keep doing this work and podcast land knows you love us. So Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much.
Yes. Thank you so much.